My in-laws looked down on me until they found out who my family really was. Let's be clear, Mark. You are marrying down. My future father-in-law, Charles, stated, not even looking at me as he swirled his brandy. Our family has a legacy, a name. What do you bring to this union? A teacher's salary, and what? A mysterious family that's never around. I sat there in their opulent living room, the gulf between my simple upbringing and their old money wealth feeling like an ocean. My fiancée, Charlotte, squeezed my hand, but remained silent. I love your daughter, sir, I said, my voice steady. That's what I bring. Charles finally looked at me, a cold, dismissive smile on his face. Love doesn't pay the country club dues, son. It doesn't maintain a certain standard of living. I strongly suggest you reconsider this. For Charlotte's sake. I didn't argue. I didn't plead. I simply looked at the man who thought bloodlines were more important than character. I felt a quiet resolve solidify within me, a final decision to never seek his approval again. I understand your concerns, I said, my voice eerily calm. 2 years later, at the dedication of the new city library, the mayor asked my father to give the keynote speech. The local news station cut to a live feed, and my father's face, the same one that smiled from my childhood photos, filled the screen. The cheer-in below him read, "Billionaire philanthropist Alexander Vance." The look of pure, unadulterated shock on Charles's face was worth every moment of their condescension. You won't believe how the tables turned. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe and let us know where you're watching from in the comments. My name is Mark. I was a high school history teacher, and I was passionately in love with Charlotte Windsor. The Windsors were old money aristocracy in our city. Her father, Charles, was a fourth-generation investment banker. Her mother, Eleanor, was a socialite who chaired every important charity committee. Their world was one of debutante balls, summer homes, and unspoken rules. My world was one of lesson plans, grading papers, and a cozy apartment I shared with my golden retriever. My parents, Alex and Irene, lived a few states away. They were kind, simple people who had raised me with strong values. They'd taught me to value integrity over income. They'd visited once, and while Charlotte adored their warmth, I could see the subtle discomfort in Charles and Eleanor's eyes at my father's worn-out work boots and my mother's homemade casserole. I proposed to Charlotte during a quiet picnic, and she said yes, her eyes shining with tears of joy. The joy was not universal. The first official engagement dinner at the Windsor estate was a trial by fire. The table was set with more silverware than I knew existed. The conversation was a minefield of names I didn't know and clubs I couldn't join. So, Mark, Charles began, after the main course was cleared. Your parents, what do they do? Charlotte mentioned something about consulting. It was the vague term I'd used to avoid the complexity of my father's work. Before I could answer, he continued. Let's be clear, Mark. You are marrying down, he stated, not even looking at me as he swirled his brandy. Our family has a legacy, a name. What do you bring to this union? A teacher's salary, and what? A mysterious family that's never around. The heir left the room. Charlotte stared at her plate. Eleanor gave a slight, apologetic wince. I love your daughter, sir, I said, my voice steady, though my heart was pounding. That's what I bring. Charles finally looked at me, a cold, dismissive smile on his face. Love doesn't pay the country club dues, son. It doesn't maintain a certain standard of living. I strongly suggest you reconsider this. For Charlotte's sake. I saw the trap then. He wanted me to get angry, to prove I was the uncouth, lower-class man he thought I was. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction. I understand your concerns, I said, my voice eerily calm. I didn't. I understood his snobbery, and in that moment, I decided the secret my family had kept for generations would remain a secret. They didn't deserve to know. Mark's in-laws think they have him all figured out, but what they don't know about his family will shatter their entire world. The truth is more shocking than they could ever imagine. We had a small, beautiful wedding. My parents were beaming, their simple joy a stark contrast to the Windsor's polished, photo-op happiness. Charles gave a speech that was a masterclass in backhanded compliments, praising Charlotte's compassionate heart for looking past my humble circumstances. We settled into our life. I was happy. Charlotte was happy. But the Windsor's condescension was a constant, low hum in the background. The breaking point came a year later. Charlotte's brother, Preston, was launching a new venture capital firm. The family was expected to invest. We were invited to a family meeting, which was, in reality, a fundraising pitch. In Charles's study, surrounded by portraits of stern ancestors, Preston laid out his business plan. He needed $5 million in seed capital. "And what about you, Mark?" Charles asked, his tone lightly mocking. "Will the educators in your family be making a contribution? Or perhaps you'd like to put in a month's salary?" A few sycophantic cousins chuckled. Charlotte's hand found mine under the table, her grip tight. "We're comfortable with our current investments, thank you," I said politely. Later, I went to get a glass of water and overheard Charles and Preston talking in the hall, their voices carrying from the kitchen. "Don't worry about Mark's side, son," Charles said. "There's no money there. I had a private investigator look into them years ago. The father, Alex, does some low-level IT consulting. The mother doesn't work. They live in a perfectly average house in a perfectly average town. No legacy, no connections, nothing." "It's just embarrassing for Charlotte," Preston replied. "She could have married anyone." I stood frozen in the dark hallway. A private investigator. They had actually hired someone to dig into my kind, generous parents, reducing their rich, fulfilling lives to a financial statement. The violation was absolute. They weren't just snobs. They were vultures who judged human worth by a bank balance. And their investigator was either incompetent or, more likely, my father's security had been too good for him to penetrate. The in-laws were so arrogant they hired a PI, but they still got it completely wrong. How deep does the secret of Mark's family really go? I didn't confront them. What would I say? Instead, I started paying closer attention. I began documenting their slights, not for revenge, but for my own clarity. I saved text messages from Eleanor suggesting better-tailored clothes. I noted the gifts of etiquette books and links to articles about social climbing. I recorded a conversation where Charles advised me to leave teaching and find a more ambitious career, like sales, so I could better provide for his daughter. But the real evidence was in their own words. At a family brunch, the topic of a recent, massive anonymous donation to the city's hospital came up. "That's the kind of legacy that matters," Charles pontificated. "Not this new money flashiness you see with tech billionaires. Quiet, dignified philanthropy from families who understand their duty." "Who do you think it was?" Charlotte asked. "Oh, one of the old families, surely," Eleanor said. "The Van Horns, perhaps. Or the Abbotts. People with real class, not just wealth." I almost smiled. My paternal grandmother's maiden name was Abbott. They had no idea they were sitting at the same table as the grandson of the very legacy they worshipped. I created a private digital file. I didn't need to gather proof of my family's wealth. I needed to build an unassailable case of the Windsor's prejudice. When the time came, I wouldn't need to say a word. I would just have to hold up a mirror. Mark is building a case, but he's still a teacher living a modest life. How can he possibly confront a family with so much financial power? The answer comes from a completely unexpected direction. I called my parents that night. "Dad," I said, after the usual pleasantries. "The Windsors, they hired a PI to look into you." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Not one of shock, but of sad resignation. "I know, son. My father," Alex said finally. "My security team flagged the inquiry years ago. We let him see the shell corporation that handles our public-facing finances. We thought it would satisfy their curiosity and keep them from digging deeper into our private lives." I was stunned. "You knew? We wanted you to be loved for who you are, Mark, not for what we have. Your mother and I, we walked away from that world of status and scrutiny for a reason. We never wanted it for you. My family weren't just wealthy. They were Vance-Abbott, one of the oldest, most powerful industrial and philanthropic families in the country. My father hadn't retired. He had stepped back from the public eye to manage the family's vast foundation, dedicating his life to giving away the fortune his ancestors had built. Their average house was on a 1,000-acre nature preserve. Their low-level IT consulting was a cover for the cybersecurity team that protected them. They're planning a gala for the new city library, I told him. Charles is heading the fundraising committee. He's been boasting for months about securing the mystery keynote speaker, some billionaire philanthropist he's been trying to get close to for years. My father was quiet for a moment. I believe I received that invitation. I declined, as I always do. "Dad," I said, my voice firm. "Accept it." I laid out my plan. Not a plan of confrontation, but one of revelation. The most powerful revenge would be for the Windsors to realize that the legacy they worshipped so much was, in fact, my birthright, and that they had spent years insulting it. The gala was in 3 months. I didn't say a word to Charlotte or her family. I watched Charles preen and boast about the event, about how his connections had secured this incredible speaker. The irony was so thick you could taste it. Mark's family isn't just rich. They are American royalty who intentionally live in secrecy. The in-laws have been insulting the very institution they aspire to join. The stage is now set for the most epic public reveal imaginable. The months leading up to the gala were a study in Windsor arrogance. Charles would joke at family dinners about needing to give me a crash course in black tie etiquette so I wouldn't embarrass them in front of the keynote speaker. This man, Alexander Vance, is a true titan, Charles told me once, puffing out his chest. Self-made, they say, built an empire and then dedicated his life to philanthropy. That's a real man. You could learn a lot from him. I just nodded. I'm sure I could. The night of the gala arrived. The grand ballroom was shimmering with the city's elite. Charlotte looked breathtaking in an emerald green gown. The Windsors were holding court at their sponsored table, preening and accepting congratulations for organizing such a prestigious event. I was calm. My parents had arrived in the city privately the day before. My father was backstage. The mayor took the podium, praising the community and the generous donors. And now, he boomed, the moment we've all been waiting for. To officially dedicate this library to a new era of learning, please welcome a man whose generous foundation made this all possible, a man who shuns the spotlight, but whose impact is felt across the nation. Mr. Alexander Vance. The crowd erupted in applause. A spotlight hit the stage, and my father walked out. He looked different in a tailored tuxedo, his posture radiating a quiet, unshakable authority. But he was unmistakably the same man who had worn flannel shirts and helped me build tree forts. At our table, the applause died. Charles Windsor's smile was frozen on his face, a mask of confusion. He looked at the stage, then at me, then back at the stage. The color drained from his face. Eleanor's hand flew to her mouth. Preston just stared, his jaw slack. My father gave a brilliant, moving speech about the power of knowledge and the importance of humility. He never once looked at our table. But as he finished, he said, "This project is particularly close to my heart because my son, a dedicated educator who understands the value of books more than anyone I know, will be using this very library. Mark, son, thank you for inspiring me." The spotlight operator, following a prearranged plan, swung the beam and illuminated our table. Every head in the ballroom turned to look at me, and at the horrified, ashen-faced Windsors sitting next to me. The secret is out, and the Windsors are publicly exposed as the biggest fools in the room. But this is just the beginning of their downfall. The real consequences start now. The silence at our table was louder than any applause. The second the gala's formal program ended, a swarm of people descended on us. Not on the Windsors, but on me. "Mark, I had no idea. Your father is Alexander Vance? Why didn't you say anything? We must have you and Charlotte over." Charles was ignored, a ghost at his own party. He stood there, a half-empty champagne flute in his hand, watching his entire social hierarchy flip upside down. The car ride home was absolute silence. When we arrived at their mansion, Charles finally spoke, his voice a strangled croak. "Mark, a word in my study." Once inside, the facade crumbled. "Why?" he demanded, his face flushed with a mixture of rage and humiliation. "Why would you deceive us like this? Was this some kind of cruel game?" "Deceive you?" I replied, my voice still calm. "You never asked about my family. You assumed. You hired an investigator who told you exactly what my father wanted him to see. You judged me and my parents as less than based on that. The only one who deceived you, Charles, was your own prejudice." "But the Vance-Abbott family," Eleanor whispered, her hand still trembling. "The donations, the legacy." "My parents believe a legacy isn't about a name on a building," I said. "It's about the quiet work, the help you give when no one is watching. They taught me that. It's a lesson you clearly never learned." The next day, the society pages ran a photo of my father and me, with the headline, "Billionaire Philanthropist Alexander Vance Dedicates Library, Honors Educator's Son." The article painted a beautiful picture of a humble, dedicated family. It also mentioned, in passing, how the Windsors had been longtime friends of the family. The snide comments, the condescending advice, the charity of their daughter marrying me, it all curdled into a social poison. They were now seen as the social climbers, the people who had somehow lucked into an association with a family far above their station and had been too blind to even realize it. The Windsors' social standing is now entirely dependent on a family they spent years insulting. And Mark isn't done yet. The final blow to their pride is still to come. A week after the gala, Preston's venture capital firm collapsed. The investors who had committed based on the Windsor name and connections pulled out overnight. Why invest with the Windsors when you could, in theory, get access to the Vance-Abbott fortune through their son-in-law? But that access was a mirage, and they knew it. Charles's own firm began to bleed clients. The story of his miscalculation was too juicy not to share in country club locker rooms and boardrooms. He had alienated one of the most powerful families in the country. He was a liability. The final blow came when the board of the city's most prestigious art museum, a board Eleanor had chaired for a decade, quietly asked for her resignation. The unspoken reason was clear. Her family's gross misjudgment and the ensuing scandal made her a poor representative for the institution. In the span of a month, the Windsor legacy, the one Charles had prized above all else, was in tatters. Their social capital was spent. Their financial future was shaky. They were pariahs, not because they were poor, but because they had been proven to be fools. I, meanwhile, did nothing. I didn't need to. I went to work, taught my classes, and lived my life with my wife. The greatest punishment for the Windsors was my continued, quiet existence. I was a living, breathing reminder of their epic failure. I established a fund in my mother's name to provide books and supplies for underfunded schools in the city. I did it quietly, through my father's foundation. When the news leaked, the contrast was stark. The Windsors took, the Vance-Abbott gave. The Windsors have lost their money, their status, and their reputation. But Charles has one last card to play, a desperate, private plea. The final confrontation reveals if anything is left to salvage. He came to our modest home alone, something he would have never done before. Charles Windsor looked old. The arrogant glint in his eye was gone, replaced by a hollow defeat. "Mark," he said, standing on my porch. "May I come in?" I led him to the living room. He didn't sit. "I have come to apologize," he forced out, the words clearly foreign to his tongue. "I was a proud, foolish man. I judged you by a standard that I now see is meaningless. I waited. My business, my family's standing, it's all gone." His voice broke. "I am not asking for money. God knows I'm not. I am asking you, please. Don't let our mistake cost Charlotte her relationship with her family. Don't let it destroy her mother." I looked at him, this broken man who had built his life on a foundation of sand. "Charlotte is a grown woman. She makes her own choices. And she has seen how you treated the man she loves. You didn't just insult me, Charles. You insulted her judgment every single day." He flinched. "You taught me one valuable thing," I continued. "You taught me that the love I have with Charlotte is stronger than any legacy, any name, any amount of money. It's the one thing you could never understand, and the one thing you can never take from us. For that lesson, I thank you." It was the most devastating thing I could have said. I had taken his own worldview and shown him its emptiness. Will you ever forgive us?" he whispered. "I forgive you for my own peace," I said. "But that doesn't mean we will be one big happy family. Some bridges, once burned, cannot be rebuilt. You will have a cordial relationship with your daughter and any future grandchildren, but you will never have a place in my confidence. That is the consequence." He nodded slowly, the truth of it finally, fully settling upon him. He had lost, not to a better businessman, but to a better man. The revenge is complete, but the victory is about more than just winning. How does Mark ensure the cycle of snobbery ends with him? The final scene provides the answer. Later, I stood with my arm around Charlotte, watching my parents in our backyard. My mother was pointing out different birds to Charlotte, and my father was tossing a ball for the dog. "You know," Charlotte said, leaning her head on my shoulder, "I always knew you were special. I just didn't know you were billionaire heir special." I kissed her forehead. "I'm not. I'm just your husband special. That's the only title that matters." In that moment, surrounded by the people I loved, the legacy of name and wealth felt distant and unimportant. The true inheritance was the one my parents had given me all along: integrity, humility, and the knowledge that love